think we're live. Jesse's probably gonna have to come closer to hear the sounds, but come on over. Hey, all of y'all out there, it's Steven here at the Center for Birds of Prey in Charleston, South Carolina. Trying to learn how to do what we do in a little different way. We're so used to having you here with us in person talking about these animals that we love to teach about, but because of the situation in the world with the coronavirus, we can't have you here. So we're working on ways that we can reach out to you and to talk with you about the things that we love to talk about. So we're going to continue here at the center to do the things that we know are necessary. We run a medical facility that cares for injured birds. Operations are still going on in the medical clinic every day. We care for a collection of educational ambassadors like the birds we're going to talk about in this little program. We have to take care of those birds. There are about 120 of them that live here on our campus with us, and so we can't just stay at home, unfortunately. We have made some changes to our staffing schedule, and after today we're going to be working on a little bit more limited basis so that we don't risk our own health, because if none of us are healthy, we can't care for these birds. So we're learning just like everybody else out there is right now, and we're going to try Facebook Live and see what happens. So hopefully as we go along, you folks will feel like interacting. Jesse's behind the camera over here, and she's going to do her best to let questions come out as we see fit. Obviously, if there are a lot of them and we can't get to them in the time that we're here, we're going to be closely following all of our social media channels. If you're just starting watching, the centerforbirdsofprey.org is our website, and you can always go there to find links to some of the resources that we're going to be posting. We've got some content. While it's not as good as being able to be here in person or to be able to have a real one-to-one conversation, it's something, and we want it to be available to all of you out there during these strange times. So the website's the best place to look for that, and then we're going to be as much as possible giving you notice about these live events. We've got some things planned for the coming weeks, some behind-the-scenes looks in our medical facility, some meet and greets with some of our educational birds. We also would love to hear some of your thoughts about the things that you'd like to see and hear about if we have the opportunity to teach you about it. So we'll just keep learning as best we can together, and maybe we'll start with a fun bird here, unless there's questions that are coming up. Jesse says no. Is anybody out there? Can you hear us? Yeah, there's people there, and they're watching. There's people watching. That's good. Well, we hope you're enjoying hearing me talk, right? So we have a couple of birds we wanted to share with you today. They're really interesting ones. The one that I have with me is probably recognizable to many of you out there. It's a really common bird that we see on a daily basis. Just on my short commute into downtown Charleston this morning, I saw multiples of these. This is a red-tailed hawk. So we can see, if we look, it's a big and a stocky bodied bird. This individual weighs about 1,000 grams, which is a little more than 2 pounds. It's a big, husky, powerful machine. They've got a dark band of feathers across their belly that you can see. He didn't really enjoy my hand coming up there, but you can see these dark feathers across his midsection. That's an identifier that we can often see even from a great distance. Natalie, what's that bird up in the tree above me? That beep, 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 beep. I should know that bird. We need Audrey over here to be calling out the warblers. There's a warbler up here. Think about who it is. It might be a yellow warbler, and there's all kinds of warblers. A pine warbler, that one. That's famous. That's a famous sound that I should know. Anyway, I know red-tailed hawk, so we'll stick with him. That dark band, the belly band, the characteristic red tail that we might see if we look from behind, and interestingly, you'll see on this guy, not so comfortable with the new format. On this guy, you'll see he has one tail feather that isn't like all the rest. This bird is transitioning from his juvenile to his adult plumage. He's still got one juvenile tail feather, so you can see that it's not red like the rest. We work primarily with raptors at the Center for Birds of Prey, so foot-grasping predators. That's the birds of prey historically, and no question these feed are for grasping. Gray squirrels, big part of the red-tailed hawk's diet. Lots of small mammals, anything that they can grab and crush with their feet. This bird ran into a problem, and we like to try to bring awareness to the problems that we see in the birds in our medical facility. We treat about, last year, 900 birds in our medical facility, and each one of them tells us a story about what's happening in nature. This guy came in after collision with a vehicle. He was hunting from the relative safety of the top of a utility pole. He flew down next to the highway, and the inevitable happened. He got run into by a vehicle, and the resulting injuries left him with an eye that wasn't functional. And you can probably see that this bird's right eye is completely missing. So as a predator, the raptors have what we call binocular eyesight, two eyes looking at the same target at the same time, so that they can process depth and know their distance from things. Without both eyes, this guy's got a depth perception problem, which is why he is here with us. This is a bird that now is being trained for education. So if we weren't all cooped up at home, we would have you out here in our amphitheater and we would be seeing this bird in flight. We're going to do our best to bring you some flight demonstrations throughout the weeks on camera as best we can. It's really hard to capture with an iPhone and our novice hands in terms of being filmmakers. It's not what we do, but we're going to do our best. And at the end of the program this morning, we're going to hopefully see another bird in flight. Red-tailed hawks all over North America, the most common daytime hunting raptor in all of our country. So you see them a lot perched on the utility poles. If we had to pick a most common daytime hunting patient in our hospital, this is it. We see a lot of red-tailed hawks. I'm sure you're seeing them every day. Now, the ones that we see every day, this, come in a variety of colors. You see dark ones and light ones. There's one that I see on my commute that is really pale on her back. But most of them show this dark on light coloration with a dark band across the middle and lighter above and below. But we have another bird that we're going to share with you that is a really interesting character. So here we have another red-tailed hawk. You might be saying, Stephen, do you have the coronavirus? Is it affecting your thinking process? Well, we know coronavirus is not a brain disease, but a respiratory one. This is indeed a red-tailed hawk, but it's a red-tailed hawk with an odd condition called leucism. Now, most of you are probably familiar with the concept of an animal being an albino. Now, albinism is kind of the extreme in terms of being leucistic. So an albino animal is missing all of the melanin in all of the tissues that normally have melanin in them. Now this bird, as you might notice, has some splotches of normal coloration. He's got a few dark feathers on his wrists. He's got a patch of dark feathers on the back of his head. His eyes are the standard dark brown that we expect to see in an adult red-tailed hawk. And he's got some dark on his beak. And actually the patches of darkness where the melanin pigment is being deposited normally change on a regular basis. So this guy just finished a molt not too long ago, and the feathers that came in this time were a little different than the ones last time. Some of them had normal coloration, others had the leucistic or lacking in white pigment or lacking in dark pigment feathers. This individual is another that came through our medical facility. He came through in kind of a little less traditional way. Someone had been watching him, which is probably not too hard to understand why someone would be watching a bird like this. Someone had been paying attention to him down in the Ace Basin of South Carolina, and while they were watching one day, they saw him involved in an altercation with another red-tailed hawk. As I'm sure you can imagine, this bird with his lacking pigment stands out like a sore thumb. Everybody can see him, and so they want to make sure that that they stay safe all the time. And this bird actually was seen very easily and picked out as a target and was beat up, almost died. But the person who was watching stepped in and rescued him and brought him into our medical facility, where he received treatment for the injuries and ended up healing from those. But we had to make a really difficult decision. Do we put him back out there in the wild where he'll likely be beat up and potentially killed, or do we resolve that he would be a non-releasable bird and better off suited as an educator to teach you more about them? So he has remained here with us, and he's like many of our educational ambassadors, being trained for flight demonstrations and educational programs. So another red-tailed hawk, just a very different one. What's that? Jesse says that no one's asking any questions. So does anyone have any questions? Or are we just enjoying watching this bird? Because if you don't have any questions, then Trying to help your high schooler with algebra, that's a tough one. Yeah. This bird has 10,000 feathers and X minus. I'm trying to come up with an algebra problem in my head. It's never my favorite.
We have what kind of bird is this, and what are the little holes on the beak? And how old is he?
So what kind of bird is it? This is a red-tailed hawk, just as is the one that's here on my glove. So maybe we can get like back and forth shots between the two, right? Both of these are the same kind of bird, the same species, red-tailed hawk, very common. But as we can see, very different in their appearance. One with leucism and one with normal pigmentation. One missing an eye and one with normal eyesight. You can see that they're different in lots of ways. The little holes on the beak are called the nares, N-A-R-E-S, or nostrils of the bird. It's just like your nostrils. They breathe in through those nostrils and out through those nostrils. You can also see on the leucistic bird's beak those little black spots that are areas where the pigment is being deposited normally, and those black feathers on the back of his head that are more like the dark feathers on the back of this bird's head. Right? Again, this is about melanin being deposited in those cells that form the beak or not, or in the feathers or not. In terms of age, it's tough to know. This individual again had that single juvenile tail feather, the one that doesn't look like the rest with the brown, and he's not like that, which I can't blame him. But those dark feathers on his tail that are red, those are the adult plumage, and the one with the bars is the juvenile plumage. This bird will be 2 years old this spring, or is 2 years old this spring. Red-tailed hawks right now are nesting. And
what do their nests look like?
What do their nests look like? They are a traditional stick builder, so they make roundish nests in trees of sticks. As a relatively large bird, they need a relatively large structure, not as large as a bald eagle nest that could be 10 feet across, but 3 feet across, and maybe a foot or a foot and a half between the top and the bottom of the structure, typically in a live tree near an edge. Red-tailed hawks are edge hunters, so they like to be in a field like the one that's behind us here. So a live oak tree like this one would make a nice spot for a nest if it were in their breeding territory.
Do we have red-shouldered hawks down here?
Now the questions are flowing.
And do they mate for life?
Right, so do we have red-shouldered hawks here in South Carolina? Red-shouldered hawks are our second most common soaring hawk, or Buteo, so yes, they're a very common bird. I'm surprised we haven't heard one here this morning as we've been talking, because we've got a pair that live right here on our campus. They're all over North America as well. Their habitat is typically a little different, a little less open, a little more forested. They tend to like wetlands and more aquatic prey, things like reptiles and amphibians that they might capture around little spots of water. So, and the other question was, what was it?
Do they mate for life?
Do they mate for life? So if we wanted to generalize, most birds of prey mate for life. We know red-tailed hawks are probably staying with the same mate year after year. They don't really travel that much. This isn't a species that undergoes long migrations. They kind of just wander during the non-breeding season. So, but in all likelihood, they're staying with the same mate until one of the pair dies. Wingspan. So these are the soaring hawks, the broad-winged birds. Their wings are long and wide, about 3 feet for the red-tailed hawk from tip to tip, and about 1.5 feet from front to back. Built for trapping hot air, built for efficient soaring, not built for speed. We'll talk about speed birds at a later date, but built for cruising on the wind. And how about a little cruising on the wind? Maybe we wrap it up with seeing what this white bird will do. He's a bird that Natalie has been training to fly for demonstrations, and we've been utilizing him in our field. He says, "I don't think I want to leave your glove. It's a pretty good spot." So we may have to move out into the sun.
As you do. How long do they live, and big ID differences between eastern and western red-tailed hawks?
Okay, so how long do they live, and ID differences between the eastern and the western. So on average in the wild, red-tailed hawks are not living that long. Most birds don't live very long simply because it's difficult to be a bird. You're on your own at a very young age, so a lot of them die when they're very young. They can, however, live a very long time. We have a red-tailed hawk here in our educational collection that was actually the 14th patient admitted to our medical facility. So she came in back in 1992, and she's still with us today. They can live a very long time. there was another question. How long do they live? And
ID differences between Eastern and
Western birds. So again, red-tailed hawks are really widespread, and they're highly variable in their plumage. And depending on where you go in their range, you're more or less likely to see different color morphs. Here in South Carolina, most of our red-tailed hawks look more like the one that we looked at, the normal bird. Out west, it seems that they get darker and darker the further west you go. There's a higher prevalence of darker morph red-tailed hawks in California than, say, here in South Carolina. But it's entirely possible to see all of the different colors throughout the country. There's some that are really light, some that are really dark, and some that kind of fall in the middle. Right now, our leucistic bird is up in this tree here. Natalie's asking him to fly across the field in front of you, and he's thinking about it, but he's also thinking about all the other things, like the little songbird that was mobbing him and this red-tailed hawk that's on my fist right behind him.
Other question, presence of bright yellow pigmentation indicate overall health.
So yellow pigmentation tends to be a dietary pigmentation. So pigments come from a variety of things. They can be deposited from your body producing them, like the melanin in the red-tailed hawk plumage, or they can be things that come from aspects of the diet. So certain prey animals might have more carotenoid pigments that make the yellow and the orange coloration that we see in the feet and in the cers of some of the birds. I'm actually going to see if maybe I can get this bird that might help. Audrey, so the pigment and the prevalence of that pigment, those yellow pigments again come from diet. It's kind of like the idea that flamingos' pink coloration comes from things they eat. Well, the yellow coloration in the pigment of the red-tailed hawk's feet comes from his diet. Some of that come from birds, and various other animals have various levels of those pigments. If they eat more of certain types of food, so here in captivity, one of the food items we feed a lot of are chickens, and those chickens have a lot of those carotenoid pigments in them. So a bird that eats a lot of wild, that's eating lots of quail and other birds, might have more of that yellow pigmentation as well.
Next planned broadcast and naming.
So next planned broadcast, we know that what we're kind of doing is learning as we go with how these things work. And again, we're going to be minimizing our staffing. We have a plan for next week. So today is Thursday. Our plan is to continue bringing you some either pre-recorded content or short snippets of live content. But our plan is to go live again at 1 o'clock on Tuesday with our medical facility. That's kind of as far ahead as we want to really say, because we're not certain what it's going to look like and what we're going to be able to accomplish. Keep an eye on our social media, and we'll let you know as soon as we have it nailed in stone. But we're planning to try to do at least 2 live broadcasts every week, and again, add some additional non-live pre-recorded content to our website and social media feeds and our YouTube channel. In fact, I think there's already a new video about owls up on our YouTube channel. Here comes that bird out of the tree. You can see how easy it is to see him, even though we're a long way away. And on a tiny little iPhone camera, you stand out like a sore thumb when you don't have any melanin for camouflage. There are other problems associated with this condition as well. The feathers without melanin aren't as strong as the ones that have a lot of the standard amount of melanin in them. And so they wear faster and they break more quickly. And as I'm sure you're aware, feathers are pretty important to a bird. They need them for all kinds of things. So if a feather's not as strong as it should be, it might break. Well, this has been fun so far. We're gonna sit down after we finish this and talk about how we felt like it went, and we would love to hear your continued feedback, things you'd like to learn about in our programs. If there's anything that we can provide, we'll do our best to do it. We want to provide you with the things that make it as close to like being here with us as we can. Obviously, that's a challenge, given that we all need to be isolating for our own safety and the safety of others. It's tough to get this bird to fly right towards a giant scary predator. That's Jessie. She's behind the camera.